Hey, hi. So today I want to talk a little bit about autoimmunity and conditions around when our body is kind of rebelling, right? And so none of this is meant to undermine any diagnosis that you've had, any treatments that you've had. This is really to sort of support understanding some of the mechanisms that are likely going on for you. So, Cliff Notes version, this will be a shortened version to really talk about, in our lifetimes, we experience environmental, emotional, physical um, stuff, right? And at a certain point, sometimes our containers get full. So, our emotional container can get full. Our physical, having dealt with sort of stresses, can get full. Environmentally, our detoxification can be full or exhausted. When any of those happen, it starts sort of a domino effect of our body trying to prioritize what it needs and what it needs support with. So, for example, stress and many other things can wear away on our gut lining. And so, when we are in an adrenal stressed state, the body starts to prioritize what it needs. It starts to poach what it needs from other places, kind of stealing it to use to support essential functions. So, what am I trying to say by that? Um, each of us has sort of that threshold of when enough is enough. And some of us are, we always talk about kind of the canary in the coal mine, who had some genetic predispositions to things. And again, epigenetics means that we don't have to be condemned to what our genes say might happen. We can shift our physiology, our mindset, our stress levels, our detoxification to support our bodies, minds, and spirits so that the switch does not flip over into the negative thing that our genes say we have. Okay. So, that said, you do not have to experience something that shows up in your genes ever. And you don't have to be stuck with it if it flips on as well. So, working with supporting your system. So when I speak about the canary in the coal mine, that is, so for example, I'm one of those people where I have had issues with detoxification pathways not working so great from genetic stuff that was kicked over by lots and lots of stress. So trauma history, all kinds of attachment stuff. Um, Enough of it over time that my body was like, hey, I can't deal with this anymore. And so it's the repercussions of that were manifestations in physical and emotional things. So started having rashes, started having brain fog, fatigue, um, depression, anxiety. I've had it all, right? And so each of them has sort of shown up when something in my environment has been too much for one of my systems to handle. And so it starts trying to deal with it, and other repercussions happen. So, for example, I found out in biology that my B6 levels from one of our testings, one of the organic acids testings, actually, that my B6 levels needed to be higher in order for me to convert what was necessary to produce dopamine. Simple explanation for it. But so depression was coming from that missing vitamin, that one vitamin that was a result of something else higher up. And so that was the thing that was missing. So when we add that in, that was helping, right? Now, there's a balance that needs to happen. So we can add too much in, we can over focus on something and knock the balance out of another. So there are ebbs and flows of figuring out what's going on. So ultimately, I had a problem with detoxification. I also was allergic to mold. And so when I've had mold exposures, everything goes haywire. Candida, skin rashes, depression, all of it. And so getting out of the moldy environment was the beginning, and then cleaning out the results of that was the next piece. So when we talk about things with autoimmunity and fatigue, um, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, a lot of these elements, like what we also want to look at is the emotional components, what's going on in our lives, stress levels, um, trauma history, um, and then physiological stuff as far as what we've been exposed to in the environment, So have we been in mold? Have we been eating food that our bodies are not happy with? Are we exposed to something at work? Are we not sleeping well? Um, let's see, what else am I trying to say here? I don't have my notes, so I'm on a passionate moment of talking about this today and adding it in as something to support you for today's process. So when our cup is full and it flows over, our body can have different reactions. Could be migraines, could be rashes, could be autoimmunity, right? So when things get off kilter, our body just freaks out and starts attacking itself and different elements of it. So what are some ways to work with this? Starting out with cleaning out environmental toxins from our environment. So cleaning out the way we live and shifting what's around us, our air, our water, our food, our cleaning supplies, all of that. That's one element that will support us. Now, that particular element supports everything. We want to have as little of that as possible because environmentally, there's a lot of it around us right now. The next piece is the emotional stuff. Now, the emotional, when we are not dealing with feelings and emotions and kind of stuffing them or feeling like we're going to be overwhelmed by them, it starts to get stored and it starts to do its dance and can be incredibly disruptive, can also kick us into a state where we're constantly a little stressed because we're battling whatever these emotions are and trying to not feel them and keep them kind of shoved down. The other piece is if there's trauma in there, and I don't mean trauma like the horrible things that could happen. Traumas could be smaller T's, so the big T's, and then smaller T's. So you don't have to be a veteran coming back or somebody who's experienced something very traumatic and visual and physical. It could be enough of the little T's, stressors along the way that just knocked you into overdrive, like filled your cup up and over and overflowed. And so that is something that not addressed, when not addressed, can have a negative effect on our nervous system and our body, both combined, that puts us into either a state of fight or flight, where we're kind of always amped up and anxious. And so we're never in rest and repair. We're always kind of heightened. And if we don't go into rest and repair, which is the parasympathetic, then we don't heal. And so when we're sleeping and we're still stressed out and in that sympathetic dominant, which is the stress, sympathetic S stress, then we're not sleeping and resting, repairing. And so again, that's the next part of this that kind of continues to tip that balance into the negative. So sleep, very important. And many of us are not sleeping for a lot of different reasons. And so we work with sleep hygiene. We work with what we're eating and drinking and when. So looking at caffeine and water. We also look at, does our brain need a little fat during our sleep time? So maybe there's something that we need to eat, like peanut butter or almond butter or something with some fat in it, avocado, before sleep to make sure our glucose levels are correct and balanced for our brain while we're sleeping, so that doesn't wake us up. So there's a lot of elements to sleep that can come in to helping your sleep get better. So that'll be part of this process. What else? Physically, right? Working with the physical manifestations of stress and working with discharging some of the stress in the body through somatics, through movement, through breath. So these are some components to help there, which are also part of the emotional, spiritual. And then working with putting it all together, right? Individually, like what things are best in what's the word I'm trying to think of? Best in concert with each other for you and what you're going through. So through this, you'll learn about a bunch of different techniques. We're going to put them into practice. We're going to add them together, and then we're going to create this whole thing that's surrounding you to support you on all the different levels, giving your emotional, physical, spiritual, body and mind and spirit support in a way that it can heal, right? And so when the body has more resilience, then it has more energy to put towards things that need to be repaired, healed, stresses that come in that we weren't anticipating. And so, excuse me, so building up that resilience is super important. but we've got to clear stuff out to be able to get to that resilient part again. So it's not an overnight fix. It is something that in time, all of these things will support your journey. And they are things that we can speak about, but the benefit is in the doing of them. Knowing about them is one thing. I'm definitely somebody who knows about all this stuff, but I have to put it into practice, as we all do. We actually have to do it for it to help. So for example, I love breath work and it's super helpful, but right now I'm on this thing where I don't feel like doing it. Something I have a little block around it. I usually do it twice a week. And this is an hour-long session, sometimes longer, of cyclical breathing, empowering breath, moving stuff out. And there's something blocked in me. The interesting piece is my mood is a little off. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm not quite sure. But what I do know is when I do breath work and other things to support me, my mood and sleep are better. And right now I'm not sleeping great and my mood's not great. So, there's the up and down of what happens. And there have been a bunch of stressful things on my plate in the last, couple of weeks, couple of months. And they kind of just came to a crescendo where I can tell my system is a little overflowing. So there are things that if I put them in place, notice how I said if, they will help me. If I don't put them in place and just know that they're available, they're just sitting on the shelf. So it's like a book that sits on the shelf. You bought the book, so that's the first step, but you've got to open it and then start reading it. And so in this case, we'll have sets of tools and things to do. They'll be on the shelf. You'll be able to open them and engage in them. So that's the kind of short form version of what we're working toward. It's kind of the idea of the treatment plan. So it's building skills, some self-awareness, some experiential work, some emotional work, some physical work, different layers to then support that resilience piece. And when the resilience piece is feeling more secure and more robust, then the body starts to feel better, as does the mind and the spirit. Then is, or the mind is anyway. The spirit is part of how we're going to get there. So a lot said, kind of one day at a time, work through this and you totally will have it, right? You'll have it. So kicking off, getting started, read through each day so you know what's coming, and then start with your exercise. Okay. And then I will see you in the next module.